It's easy to get carried away by training camp hype and highlights, but sometimes the hype is real. Sometimes you have to read into the positive news that you hear. These guys might actually be skyrocketing up draft boards because of what we've seen and heard already.
If you can't wait to start drafting fantasy football teams, you don't have to. Underdog Fantasy has drafts going on all offseason with tons of unique and fun formats. Not to mention their flagship Best Ball Mania 5, where one lucky winner will become a millionaire. Plus, they already have pick'em lines ready for week 1 of the NFL season and their new streak format where you can win 1,000 times your entry. Just go to UnderdogFantasy.com and sign up using promo code ENDGAME to get a special pick'em that you can't get anywhere else, plus up to $250 in bonus cash.
Now, you'd think it might be hard for the number one receiver on the best team in football to get more traction, but there's a reason to be now more, optimistic about Rashee Rice. Is not only is he playing in training camp, but he might actually play all this season.
Yeah, so, we obviously, when that car accident happened early in the offseason, a lot of speculation, talks about him missing half the season, suspension. And then, of course, they went out, they signed Hollywood Brown, they drafted Xavier Worthy, and his ADP, remember, he was early in the offseason, he was going in the second round, and then he fell way far in drafts. But now it sounds like he may not get suspended at all. This sounds like it's going to be kind of similar to what happened with Alvin Kamara, where it may get pushed to next season. So we may be getting a full season of Rashee Rice here. I really think we're going to. And right now, he's a value in fantasy drafts because he now goes after, I think he started to creep back up over Xavier Worthy, but he goes after Hollywood Brown. So I thought Rashee Rice was being way overdrafted early in the offseason. Then when people thought he was going to miss half the season, I thought he was a value. I still think he's a value now because it looks like we're going to get a full 17 games of Rashee Rice.
Yeah, that right there has a huge impact for fantasy drafts. It's really interesting, though, because there's a lot of other factors in the mix here. Like, they just got 2 new receivers, one in the first round of the draft, and of course, Hollywood Brown in free agency. What is that going to mean for Rice's target share? I think there'll be enough targets to go around, but still, the very fact that we might not see any games missed from Rice means you should probably draft him where he was supposed to be drafted before news of the suspension. I don't know if any player has seen his perceived value bounce back and forth up and down more than Javonte Williams, who people were very optimistic about, and then, made it sound like he was going to be a casualty or something. He was not even going to make the roster. And now all of a sudden he's the clear RB1. What's going on with Javonte Williams and why is he now a riser?
Yeah, this is a cautionary tale, and don't get caught up in beat writer hype. Listen to what the coaches say and pay attention to how the player is being used. Because coming out of OTAs, we heard beat writer reports saying I think Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine are battling for the last roster spot among running backs. And then what do we see at the start of training camp? Javonte Williams, not only the clear number one running back in this offense, but then Sean Payton raving about him, saying he lost 11 pounds. He looks great. He looks explosive. Yeah. Javonte Williams, I've been saying it all offseason. I think he's going to be the RB1 in Denver. Now, it's not going to be the most exciting offense. I don't think he has incredible upside, but I think Javonte Williams still is a steal in fantasy drafts.
Well, when it comes to this or any other backfield or depth chart, battle, I think it's just best to use common sense. Common sense says Javonte Williams has no reason not to be the RB1, and he's going to be. But if there's concern I personally have with Denver, it's that I really think they're just going to be terrible this year. So it's not about what the beat writers are saying or the coaches are saying. I have concerns because I just don't think there's a lot of points being scored by the Broncos. But as far as where Javonte should be valued, again, this really shouldn't have moved at all based on what anybody said the past few weeks. All right, but now we're going to put a lot of stock into what a coach just said because Dave Canales, very well-respected new head coach, has basically said the entire offense is going to run through Deontay Johnson. Are you buying that?
I'm absolutely buying it. I'm buying this. We've been buying Deontay Johnson ever since he signed with Carolina because, one, we felt like this offense is going to surprise people with Dave Canales. And number two, we know Deontay Johnson is going to be a target hog. And then what does Dave Canales come out and say? He says, hey, in our offensive schemes, we kind of try to look for one guy, we focus on one guy. And the question we've been asking ourselves is, where is Deontay Johnson at? Meaning, we're looking for Deontay Johnson over and over again. This guy's going to be one of the leaders in targets. And like I said, this offense, no, it's not going to be elite, but it's going to surprise you with how good they are. Deontay Johnson, one of the best values in fantasy drafts right now.
If there was ever a clear case of confirmation bias, This is it. This is exactly what we've been saying and feeling basically since the moment he signed there. He's going to be a target magnet. And Canales just came out and said what we already knew. So, yeah, he's still going to be undervalued, I think, at drafts because Carolina was so bad last year. They're going to get better, but at the very least, we're going to see Deontay eat. Now, are we going to see Jameson Williams finally eat, at least have a snack or something? Because he did almost nothing last year. He didn't even play at the beginning because of a suspension and then was barely used and kind of came out at the end. But it sounds like Dan Campbell has had a change of heart. And Dan Campbell, he usually says what he means.
Yes, Dan Campbell wears his heart on his sleeve. So when Dan Campbell says something, even I got to take stock. Now, I liked Jameson Williams as a prospect. I wasn't as high on him as some other people. And I still don't think Jameson Williams is ever going to be like an alpha number one wide receiver, especially with Amon-Ra St. Brown there. But I think this shows that the Lions have confidence in him, and we're at least going to see Jameson Williams be fantasy relevant because he has not been fantasy relevant at all so far in his career. I mean, not even like a spot start relevant. But if you're looking for upside in not the later rounds, but like I guess like the late single digit rounds, I think Jameson Williams is one of those guys you got to target because this is a guy we know has that big playability. The Lions offense with Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson has been good. So, yeah, I'm buying into Jameson Williams.
Well, this is also confirmation bias for me because I kind of got the feeling Jameson Williams might be sneaky value. And now the word is out. We've heard he's routinely getting open. Okay, fine, whatever. It's training camp. One reporter from The Athletic said he literally looks like a different player, like night and day. Okay, that's encouraging. But here's what I'm taking stock in is Dan Campbell himself. Again, a guy who probably more than any other coach puts a lot of weight into those intangibles, right? The mentality of a player. Yeah, he's not really an analytics guy. He said that Jameson Williams looks like a more mature guy and he's putting in the work. That means so much to Dan Campbell. And so that means they're going to get him targets. With Jared Goff used to look away from him. Now he's looking for Jameson Williams. So yeah, I'm all in.
Do you want to win your fantasy league but don't have time to do all the research? Are you tired of drafting mediocre teams and then having to constantly hope you hit it big on the waiver wire just to compete? Do you wish you could have a fantasy expert like Pierre or myself with you while you draft? Well, now you can. With our app DraftLane and our live draft pilot, we will guide you through every pick of your draft and tell you exactly which players we would pick if we were on the clock. Our proprietary algorithm will take into account your league settings, scoring, and roster requirements to identify the best picks every time you are on the clock to ensure you have a winning team from week one. It's the closest thing you can get to having us there drafting with you. Get the biggest edge in fantasy football. Just go to your app store and search for DraftLane and download it today and get ready to dominate your draft.
All right, what about some GM talk? We hear that Chris Ballard of the Colts has been talking up Josh Downs, but they did just draft a receiver very early in A.D. Mitchell. So what's the deal here?
Well, here's the deal. If I'm not mistaken, the question Chris Ballard was asked was about A.D. Mitchell. And he talked a little bit about Mitchell and then went on to rave about Josh Downs. Like, hey, don't forget about Josh Downs. He was so impressed by him last year. And he said, hey, remember, this guy was playing really well before that injury. We've talked about this too. I think Josh Downs is going to be the guy that he's kind of forgotten in this offense, right? Michael Pittman, an early round pick. A.D. Mitchell, the shiny new toy. Don't forget about Josh Downs. He goes very late in fantasy drafts, and it wouldn't surprise me if he is actually the number 2 receiver here. He also did say, not that this is a plummeting video, but he also did say, hey, don't forget about Alec Pierce. Like, it's not a sure thing that A.D. Mitchell is the number 2 outside receiver. He likes Alec Pierce too, but I think Josh Downs is going to man that slot role and be a beast this year, and you're getting him at a huge value.
Yeah, look, we both liked Downs a lot last year, and he was actually coming on first half of the season, was looking like a nice fantasy asset, and then the injury, and then things just kind of went south from there. And I mean, he had Gardner Minshew at quarterback, so what can you do? What caught my eye is that they're saying that he's being used this year at all 3 levels of the field, which means, yeah, he's a slot guy, but he's not just going to run those little short intermediate routes and, have to rely on a ton of targets. He's going to be somewhat of a vertical threat as well, and that really stands out to me. So Josh Downs seeming like a nice breakout candidate. Now, who's the number 2 receiver going to be in Pittsburgh? Could it actually be a tight end?
I think it could be. That's what we're hearing. It sounds like they're using Pat Freiermuth like the number 2 wide receiver. This has been the big question a lot of people have asked over the offseason. Like, okay, George Pickens is the number 1, but who's the number 2? Is it rookie Roman Wilson? Is it, young wide receiver Calvin Austin? Is it somebody else? Well, maybe it's nobody. Maybe it is Pat Freiermuth. And, I really regret on our league winning QB and tight end one, when we talked about a later round tight end, I thought about putting Pat Fryermuth on there, but I'm like, man, I just can't do it with Arthur Smith. But now I regret it because I'm starting to come around on the fact that maybe Pat Fryermuth is going to be one of these late round tight ends that, help teams win fantasy championships. Remember, we were very high on him last year, had a down year. A lot of times these are the guys that bounce back the following year when they've been given up on. So I'm definitely buying into this. I could see Pat Fryermuth being the number 2 target in this offense.
Yeah, Arthur Smith is single-handedly going to turn a lot of fantasy players away from pretty much every Steeler other than George Pickens, right? But we do have to remember that in his interesting tenure as the Falcons coach, he did use the tight end a lot, especially around the goal line. Now, the problem is it wasn't always Kyle Pitts, but there might have been different issues, because of that. Pitts wasn't fully healthy. And look, he was working with Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heineke. At the very least, Russ Wilson, Justin Fields should be more capable of getting the ball to a guy like Fryermuth. Remember, Fryermuth, one of the best tight ends from his draft class. He's been productive. So, yeah, I think for the most part, I'll buy into this. Can we buy into the Patriots receiving core or offense at all outside of Mondre? Well, if you are going to buy in, the rookie receiver you might be looking for is actually Javon Baker.
Yeah, this is one where I may not be buying in because I don't necessarily like the kind of hype like, oh, he looks so good. Oh, he moves different than other guys. Like, yeah, everybody looks good when it's 7 on 7s, 11 on 11s, no pads on. I mean, I know they started to wear pads, but yeah, I don't know. I think Javon Baker is fine. I'm not really buying the hype here. I still think Demario Douglas is probably the wide receiver you want. And then for me, Jalen Polk, I think, would be second. So Baker's fine as like a super late dart throw, but that's about it for me.
What's interesting is Baker's been getting hyped since the day he was drafted. I mean, he just got all this swag. I think even before he was drafted, right? Talking about his swag and all this, that's great. That by itself doesn't make for a productive receiver. But I will say there's an opening here because Kendrick Bourne will probably be the number 1 receiver. He's recovering from season-ending injury. Who knows when he'll be back? Demario Douglas has been missing practice with a hand injury. That opens, a situation where Baker can stand out, and he's consistently made those wow plays. I don't know how productive any Patriots receiver is going to be, but I think the one who's probably got that big play explosiveness in him is Baker. And if there's any team that makes for great late round value in fantasy, it's the Rams, right? We saw it last year with the receiver Puka Nakua and running back Kyron Williams. Could this year's late round breakout be a guy who's been in the league for years?
Yeah, I've been talking up Demarcus Robinson all offseason, one of my favorite late round picks. Going to be the clear number 3 wide receiver in this offense. And look, I know right now Cooper Kupp is saying, oh, I'm looking forward to being healthy this year finally. But for how long? I mean, really, for how long? I hate to say it, but 2 years running of a guy not being able to stay healthy and not getting younger here. So even if Cooper Kupp does stay healthy, though, I think Demarcus Robinson has a clear role, a clear defined role in this offense. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. And if Cooper Kupp does miss time, he's the clear number 2.
Yeah, I'll just say at this point, I just think I've firmly decided I can't draft Kupp where he's being drafted. It's just not worth the risk. And Robinson, we saw what he did at the end of last year. Imagine if Kupp misses an extended period of time again. And even if he doesn't, this offense throws the ball enough. Robinson has value. So one of the best late round dart throws, it doesn't have to be a rookie or an unproven guy. It could be a guy like Robinson who's now finally stepping up in the right situation. Those are some players who are skyrocketing already, seeing their draft stock go up early in training camp. And of course, on the flip side, some guys are seeing their value go down. These are the players we're worried about right now.